is also known as Mamabotanica. And we're excited to have her talk about how important it is to make room for flowers in your gardens. Joan?
Great. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. And flowers are really special to me, and partly I think uh, because I came not sort of through flowers. I used to really think that flowers were silly. I thought they were silly. I thumbed my nose at the whole idea of devoting growing space to flowers, and now I'm really just absolutely devoted. So I love to talk about flowers.
Yeah, and your garden is incredible. I haven't been able to see it in person, but by pictures and seeing the products that come out of your garden, it's unbelievable. I understand why you're enamored with flowers.
Thank you. Mhm.
Yeah, so I'd love to begin with this little workshop that you've prepared and just hear about all that you have to, what you've learned, how you got there, and and what kind of tips and tricks you have for people who also want to be starting in a
Yeah, that is a lot right there. So I've got a
garden.
little outline so I don't forget any things to speak about, but also if anyone has questions too, I would love to answer those. Um, so I was a permaculture person, and I used to really admire gardening. I came from farming families in Minnesota, but I grew up in the suburbs and was an army brat even before then, moved around a lot. And I had more of like a political appreciation for growing in general before I had an actual kind of dirt loving appreciation of it. And then I think I have a little bit of a history of being kind of self righteous about what I'm into. As I've gotten older, I think it's gotten a little more mellow. But it used to be like, kill your lawn, right? Now that I have kids, I'm really grateful that we have some lawn. And why would you grow anything that you couldn't eat? Like, it was just so beyond me that you would waste your time to do that. And I really, especially roses, kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Like, I just thought, like, it would see these big expanses of roses, and especially like with bare dirt underneath them, which is not so great anyway, and just be like, you know how much food people could grow there? I mean, it's kind of funny.
I get you. I feel it.
Yeah. I mean, and certainly the way that people grow plenty of roses and flowers, but even food is not very earth friendly in general. But that we can table for a little bit
For
later.
a whole
Um,
another week.
Very much so, yeah. Um, so I found out about permaculture. I was actually working up in Big Bear. I was working for the Forest Service doing restoration ecology and growing little, going out and gathering seeds, places that for wheel vehicles and stuff, and it just had been really damaged by people. And growing the seeds in the greenhouse, and then going out and planting them again. And I met a family who were the dad was Australian, and so they knew a lot about Australian things. And one of the things that they were really into was permaculture. And it was like, well, that sounds really intriguing. And then I found a permaculture instructor and did my first permaculture design course. And it was just like, boom, like it opened up. It connected is actually what it did. It connected so many different things together. I was even like teaching yoga at the time and teaching environmental science as a high school teacher. And having finished my botany degree at Cal State Fullerton, looking at ethnobotany and the way people use plants as medicine. And suddenly it was like there was a whole framework that fit so many of these things together. So I really got into growing through permaculture and wanting to practice what I preach. And from there, I got very excited about edible landscaping and just wanted everything in the yard to be edibles, fruit trees and exotic perennial edibles and all kinds of things growing. And I did that for many years, and it was satisfying and wonderful. And the food forest that we planted in my old house is where my mom now lives, so I get to visit it, and we have like crazy numbers of nectarines and apples, and that's really fun. And then when I fell in love and had my first child, my son Peter, um, it was I just was unprepared for how much time it takes to raise a child, and I wasn't like doing all these things that I had been doing before. And I kind of just sort of like stumbled into, oh yeah, I think I picked up some dahlia tubers, like at a big box store, like nothing really. And I planted them like whatever. I had beds that I planted a lot of food in, But with not so much time for the growing of the food, it was not going all that well, but I was still putting a lot of time and effort into it. And I remember seeing that first dahlia flower and literally just like I just was like I couldn't take it. It was like, but this is so beautiful, and it just shifted something like beauty. You know, one of the permaculture principles is that you should always obtain a yield. And, you know, for whatever you do, there should be some product to it,
Yeah.
and it's a great way to justify almost anything. Also, but I had never really thought of beauty as a yield before. You know, it's like, but that's not practical. I mean, but that's like a world without art, right? It's a world without a lot of things. Like beauty really does matter. And I think as I was raising children and I had less time for myself, that having that little bit of beauty was transformative. It would like take me somewhere calm and quiet where no one needed snacks, you know? Um,
That's
keep on
beautiful.
going.
No, that's as a mother myself, I can absolutely relate, and that was just really profound what you just said because it really is so true. The beauty is so important, and you take what you can get when you are so strapped for time. And wow, so nice.
Yeah. So
So you found the beauty, and you
found
grew
the
from
beauty.
there.
Just was running with it, you know. And then it also helped that my beloved had gone to do this really expensive like spiritual workshop in Peru. Meanwhile, both like one of my 6 month old had pneumonia, the 3 year old had an ear infection, like didn't sleep, just screamed all night, and then I also came down with a horrible respiratory infection while he was gone. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do something for me, something that I wouldn't normally do. You know, I'm going to sign up for this flower class, and I did. And so I'm really glad he did that workshop too, because otherwise I would never have been like, I would just not have spent that much on me, honestly. But it was through Florette, who's a woman in the Pacific Northwest, and she has wonderful books. They're really accessible and beautiful, and she grows like truckloads of dahlias because it's really the climate for those flowers. And the class was wonderfully set up. It was beautiful. All of the aspects of it were beautiful, and it just like made me realize not only like that I could potentially do this, but perhaps this was even a model that could scale. Like if people have a yard, you know, I mean, I was also thinking about like people who need a little extra side income. I haven't quite worked all the details out about whether or not that's feasible, but I think that it's possible. In fact, I really believe that with the way the world is right now, the way the economy is right now, that growing things in whatever dirt you have, feeding the soil really is the number one thing. And then figuring out what you can grow is just such an incredibly useful model for neighborhood resilience that's sort of like the, I don't know, like the flowers are like the front page. Look at how pretty they are. And the real story is the soil, right? Because that's what makes the pretty flowers. And then the story, you know, what we could do with that is, again, it's like this connecting points. You know, when you have really rich soil, which is honestly, it's the best way to grow flowers in anything, then you feed the soil then creates miraculous abundance, right? Holds more water if you're really good about how you feed it. And then we have plenty of food and beauty to go around. So I'm that's sort of like the hidden superhero mission, you know, underneath all of it. That's there too.
That's great. What would your superhero name be?
I think it's Mamabotanica, actually. That's the
Absolutely.
superhero.
Oh, that's so great. It's a great mission to have, and I think that you're so far so successful in it. You know, and thank goodness that your husband went on that trip,
I know. And
literally and
it was a great trip for
figuratively.
him too. So
Yeah.
it worked out well.
Great, great. I'm just see a couple people are joining in on the video. But did you want want to continue a little bit on your practices and the workshop?
Sure. Um, so as far as my even just my growing practices, part of my mission too, as a botanist, someone who's actually like formally trained in botany, that's what my master's degree is to help people connect to nature. And for me, a lot of that is botany. So, first of all, like what I want people to understand is like a flower is not, it's not a plant. It's like, that isn't a flower plant. That they're like, we just lost this idea that like flower is actually just part. I'll just bring this crop over again too.
Yeah.
This, and then look at this, everyone. This is part of the reproductive part of the life cycle of this chrysanthemum, right? This happens to be the reproductive part. Like there's tiny little flowers up here on this celosia. There's even flowers, little green buds on this asparagus fern. But the flower is just part of the life cycle of a plant. There's such incredible diversity of flowers, which is part of why they don't have as much pest pressure when I was growing vegetables. And another reason why the flowers was like, oh, this is so much easier than growing vegetables. But in a flower garden, you have an incredible diversity of different plant families. Whereas with vegetables, you've got like the cucurbitaceae, which are the squash and melons, the solanaceae, eggplants, tomatoes, peppers, the asteraceae, latuca, all the lettuces, and I mean, not a huge number of plant families like salviaceae, which is like basil and mint and most of the herbs. But in the flower kingdom, like when you say kingdom, it's not botanically correct. They're all plant kingdom, but the botanical families of flowers is huge. I mean, it's been really humbling, but also exciting as the botanist, the one who wants to like nerd out and like read lots of botanical Latin, to know that they're all so different. Like they all have different needs about like when they grow, and some are daylight sensitive. They only will grow when the days are getting shorter. Others can grow all year round. Some prefer cool temperatures and they're daylight neutral. Like it's really, it's a lot. It's kind of thrilling.
It is very. What are, we're obviously in Southern California, you're in Pasadena. Yeah. What are some varieties that you think are most successful or easiest to grow here in our climate zone?
Yeah. Well, I think you even have some behind you. Chrysanthemums right now is when they grow and when they bloom. And so there's cushion mums, which will bloom. We have some in the like right in the front of our house on either side of the front steps, and they've actually been blooming for quite a while, but I'm also pretty good about deadheading them when they grow. So another thing in terms of like flowers being just part of the life cycle of a plant, if you have a great love, let's say, of chrysanthemums, and you go to Fig Earth Supply and you buy that 4-inch pot of chrysanthemums, and then you go plant it because you love the flowers so much, they will flower, and then the flowers will fade, and then they're not going to do a whole lot until it's the next cycle for their bloom, right? I mean, some cushion mums will bloom again, but if you go out and you cut those flowers, the plant is still actively working at getting more flowers to grow. So you extend the flower beauty of that plant by quite a bit if you harvest it. And this is a whole thing that, like, if you're growing vegetables, like what happens if you don't cut the zucchini, right? You get this like boat.
Yeah.
It's not super useful. But often, I understand the point of like, oh, but I want them to be pretty in the yard. That's fine. But if you want them in the yard and, to have in a vase, like you've got to keep harvesting those flowers. I mean, and this even goes back to my ethnobotany days at Fullerton. There's a wonderful book called Tending the Wild by an ethnobotanist named Kat Anderson. And she had looked at the native people's basketry supplies and noticed that like the willows that she saw were all these like forked with these scrawny short branches and lots of little side branches. And like, there's no way that this is, this is the material that was used to make baskets, but basketry material is super long, straight shoots. So how could this be? And when she started asking people, they're like, oh, because we used to go out, we used to coppice, we used to burn, they're constantly maintaining the environment. This notion of harvest, like of conserving through use, like that we have a reciprocal relationship when we use something, we help encourage its bounty. Is something the flower garden is a really wonderful teacher of. And I think a lot of that has been lost in our sort of like Western culture mindset that like conservation is something you do by fencing something off and keeping people out. If chrysanthemums grow really well, but you got to keep deadheading stuff if you want to keep it producing. Same with your roses. If you grow roses and you want to have more blooms, you have to cut the spent flowers off. Otherwise, it will go and it will make seeds, which might be something that you're looking for. But if it's not, and you deadhead, then you have longer season of bloom. So chrysanthemums are great, and you'll have longer appreciation of them if you deadhead them. I think you don't have calendulas behind you right now.
I do,
but those are.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
And
okay.
Zinnias.
Awesome.
I notice a huge difference when I'm cutting my zinnias. I mean, I guess it's kind of like you're acting, if we're really trying to model nature and how it would be best, you're acting as the deer or the bunny that would in nature be eating.
You're a browser.
So
yeah.
And because we don't want the deer to eat our flowers, we have to enjoy them for ourselves.
Right. I would love it if a deer came to my backyard, though. I mean, I say that theoretically. In practice, I think I would be devastated. So calendula, though, is also another great one. And it's, so we have like 2 seasons of flowering. And it's actually something that I'm working on not right now, obviously, but like right now, yes. I am making a flower calendar for Southern California. I think the the winter one is just about done, but I want to make it pretty. And then I have another one that's for warm season. So like the cool season and the warm season. I mean, this is something that I had figured out with vegetables. It's sort of an obvious one in California for vegetable growing. But as I was learning with all these different flower courses and looking at what different people said to do when, like it didn't fit here. We don't get a frost. Maybe a tiny little frost pocket. Like I have a frost pocket like that big in my yard in the middle. I know exactly where it is, but the rest doesn't really freeze here in Pasadena. So these like there it's like, oh, the dahlias are done because there was a frost, and here we don't get that. So I've been working out how to, just with my own trial and error, there's a lot of error that goes in there, to figure out like when to do stuff. And I get questions on Instagram for people saying, oh, I love that purple flower. What is it? Like, oh, it's a dahlia. Like, oh, well, I'm going to grow it now. And it's now like October. Like, yeah, but you could buy it. You could probably buy it. Some disreputable person will sell you dahlia tubers right now, but they're not going to do anything. So just understanding the seasonality of stuff is really important. Like zinnias are going to be great until it gets cold, and then they're not going to be doing so well anymore. But I think you probably have low flowered zinnias, not the like super tall 4-footers.
Yeah, right now we have like the profusion mix, which are like the lower ones.
Right.
That's
so they're a little faster.
And they're already like established.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, and we're entering the cool season stuff for calendula, which is so super useful and beautiful. Like calendula petals in a salad is another one of those things. And like violets and pansies, like putting those in the food that you eat is like, it makes me feel like Cleopatra or something, like, anyway. So that being able to eat flowers too is nice.
That's a good word.
Yeah.
If you could give a quick list, what winter, like what would you plant right now? What should people be adding to their winter gardens?
Just for the sheer floral beauty of it, definitely Ranunculus. Ranunculus are like no-brainer for Southern California winter. They're really straightforward. You get these. Well, I get a little botany now. You get these they're corms, which is a underground stem modified for storage. I mean, like a dahlia tuber is kind of like a potato. So these like have little toes on them, which are starch storage units. Okay. And that's partly what gives them the energy to grow. So you can plant them in the ground. They go down pretty easy. Like you don't even really need a trowel or anything, like 2 inches, 2 to 3 inches below the soil surface. And then in 90 days, you have flowers, which is great. Ranunculus and anemones are really lovely. Snapdragons. In many parts of the country, snapdragons grow all through the summer, but many parts of the country, they think hot is like 80 degrees. Yeah. So for us, and there's a kind of obnoxious number of varieties of snapdragons and whole like series of them. Um, the rocket series is a little bit more heat tolerant. There's the Madame Butterfly snapdragons, which are really the flower petals, like the way that the petals are formed is really really pretty and fancy and extra fluffy petals, and those do pretty well here. When I first started growing, I tried a variety called Potomac, which sounded like 5 feet high and like, whoa, the pictures were so pretty. I wanted those, but they need cool season and long days.
Okay.
So like we don't get that. You know, when our days are long, it's really hot. So just like learning what to trial and error, what varieties to grow is important. Stock. I grew a bunch of stock last year, which I loved. But then also learning trial and error is that stock is something called a one and done flower. So it puts up, it's like a big single stem sunflower. You know, it's one thing and it's a beautiful, fragrant, lovely thing. And you can eat the petals and they taste a little peppery and they're great. And then you cut it and then it's gone, right? So I have a bunch of branching stock. It's called quartet. So you cut it like this is again like just from practicality's sake. You know, I'm a mom. Like I don't have time to plan my successions of like 6 different times I'm going to seed that. You know, because I'm also growing in my backyard, which is like 300 square feet of bed space. And some of these flower farmers have like each bed is like they've got acres and it's like 70 feet long and 4 feet wide. And like, wow. Mine is, I'm planning like each square foot, so I try to go with things that are cut and come again, things that will keep on producing abundantly, like the zinnias, like calendula. The chrysanthemums are not quite like that because they kind of have a season of blooming and then the season is over. But there's plenty of great things that are cut and come again. Snapdragons, Ranunculus are awesome for that.
It's great. And then it's, speaking of space and that you're growing quite a bit in a small space, um, how much spacing are you giving? Like, how much are you crowding those beds? What are the kind of space requirements for
Right.
flowers?
Yeah, so all the different flowers typically have like different spacing needs, but as a general rule, and this is based on Erin Benzikind from Floret, she does 9 inch, so there's like 9 inch from one plant to the next, and kind of on a like a chicken wire sort of grid, so it's not like straight rows, that it's diagonals to maximize. And then some flower friends of mine who I've not met in person, but I have great esteem for them, Kijun and Stephen Hong Elder. They farm in somewhere in New Mexico, high up, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I think or Santa Fe. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But they have a series of ebooks about micro flower farming and flower farming if you want to be growing for weddings. And I mean, they're just wonderful, accessible, inexpensive books, super practical. And they are growing stuff at 6-inch centers. So they say like if you plant them a little closer, you get taller stems, and you can also get more flowers out of that. So.
Okay. Interesting. Very cool. That's great. And so what are some of your, like, what's in your garden right now? What are you harvesting right now? I guess that's another question. I mean,
yeah.
What is being cut in your garden?
Right. So this morning I went out and I harvested a lot of chrysanthemums and a rudbeckia. We'll show a rudbeckia here. Like this guy is the rudbeckia with that kind of burnt rust color, and then a whole bunch of different sorts of chrysanthemums in here. This is a weed that my neighbor grows, not on purpose, and then it grows through the back fence and over and around, and I cut as much of that as I had time for. I'm going to pull up a flower arrangement here just to show you some other flowers. There we go. Some roses. I got a rose right in the middle here.
Oh, that color is gorgeous. It's so nice.
So that's another benefit of growing your own too, is like you can't really find those colors, So I grow my own because I really am very, very picky about colors. And I can't tip this over much because it will spill, but I've got there's even an apple stalk.
Oh,
there it is.
Nice.
that I needed to prune anyway off the apple tree. There's a little bit of mint, love in a puff vine, which is something that I just really, really adore. It grows very easily and it makes these wonderful little puffs. Um, Pull this puff off for you. So I deflated it sadly when I pulled it off. But these little air-filled puffs, and then when they get brown inside of them is a beautiful little black seed with a white heart on it. I mean, it's like the most wonderful, precious thing. It's the wonder, like, oh my goodness, like it's for kids too. Like, look, there's a heart inside here. So that, been harvesting that like crazy. If I had done a second planting of zinnias, like in June or July, which is highly advisable, I'd be harvesting a lot of zinnias, but right now I'm harvesting just a few. Celosia is still doing well. It's kind of a feathery looking thing. It's generally related to like amaranth. It has those tiny little black seeds. What else? The roses, I think I mentioned that. Basil, that columnar basil that I think we had talked about before. That's just such a great, nice, tall green in a garden.
Yeah. You had us carry apple mints once for
yeah,
it's
one great
of your
too.
Other workshops, and I love that
yeah.
so much.
Yeah, and I actually put some in the vase back there too, because like the chrysanthemums aren't very fragrant, and if you give people flowers, they almost always stick their nose in to smell it. And if there's no fragrant flowers, and like dahlias have no fragrance, but if you put like a sprig of like lemon basil, there's like Mrs. Burns lemon that's a wonderful basil. They're like, oh, it's beautiful smelling. Like lemon basil is beautiful smelling. Yeah, and in the basil's already like I could have done a second planting of basil too, and then I would still have basil, but it's still I've only been doing this like three years now, still learning.
So, I mean, at FIG, obviously our focus is, food and medicine plants, but we also have been expanding our selection of pollinators, maybe some things that are not necessarily edible or that are, and because they're just so beneficial. Have you noticed a big difference? Like, what kind of pests are you dealing with? If many at all, what have you noticed as far as what have been the benefits other than beauty and love? What have been the benefits of having a flower garden?
Right, there are really, really myriad benefits, and as a matter of fact, part of why why it wasn't such a challenge, like it wasn't such a huge loss to stop growing so many edibles, is because all of the effort that I was putting in, I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only person that tries to grow broccoli and it just gets covered in aphids. Like if the cabbage loafers don't get it, the aphids are like, I was like, look at what we're going to eat tonight. We harvested it from the garden, and like soaking it into this, just like the top of the water is just covered in aphids. Like, it'll be good. I promise it'll be fine. It's protein. It's good for you. And partly because there's not as much genetic diversity in those vegetable plants. And like, I'm not out spraying. It's just not, I mean, I don't have anything against organic pest control, most organic. Anyway, I'm not going to say that. I just try to be low maintenance with what I do. I don't want to add any chemistry that I, even there's plenty of organic stuff you can spray that's still pretty damaging to pollinators and to the ecology that I'm trying to achieve here. So I just, try not to spray anything. We do use BT for caterpillars, but other than that, there's nothing. So I just was battling pests, aphids and caterpillars, and like it just felt overwhelming, and like there was no good way to do it. Now, it was also a new garden, and like a permaculture perspective is it takes about 7 years for you and the garden to figure out your rhythm together. For all the predatory, the lizards population to come back up, and the predatory spiders, and for the pest predators to establish their populations. Like what happens first is the pests establish their populations. And that was kind of where I was like, I'm out of this vegetable thing. I'm tired of it. It's too much work, and I'm tired of eating bugs. But with the flowers, because there's so much diversity, and also because of the way that I arrange my beds, because you can plant a lot of flowers in a square foot, depending on the variety. There's it's sort of the ideal polyculture, where there's so many different things within a very short range of each other, that if you get a pest on one, it doesn't travel very far. I still have some aphids, but like at the tips of the growing chrysanthemums, like they'll get aphids, and when I see it, I can literally just wipe them off. Like, they're not that bad. Grasshoppers, I do get some grasshoppers, and then something that I'm not quite sure what it is. It looks a lot like a grasshopper, but it's not a long body. It might be a katydid.
Okay.
So more like round end body. At first I thought maybe it was like a juvenile version of a grasshopper, and I'm still not entirely sure what that is. And I'm also not entirely sure that it's a pest.
Yeah.
The trouble is, like, when you're trying to be all eco, I need an entomologist to come help me know that I'm not like clipping the friendly. So I have very little pest pressure, which is really good. Part of what I love about being out in the flower garden is, like, the birds are all over the place. There are lizards everywhere. There's butterflies. There's just like clouds of butterflies around. So, and I know of the butterflies also are caterpillars that could be eating flowers, but they're mostly on the passion vine. They're Gulf fritillaries, and then really other beautiful, beautiful butterflies around. So it's just not nearly as impacted by pests, which is it's really quite nice. So that's part of that, establishing the ecology, and then building healthy soil so your plants are more resilient too.
Exactly. What about powdery mildew? Do you ever have an issue of that?
Oh yeah, I forgot about fungal things. Fungus is also a pest. Yeah, that's what happened to the zinnias. And at this time of year, the dahlias are also, they're just, I'm just cutting down because of powdery mildew. And again, like, if I had been a little bit more proactive with, like, I think you can spray with like a milk spray or something, baking soda and milk.
A few solutions,
yeah. So again, like, if you catch that, like, before it happens, because once you see it, that's a lot of fungal contamination already. But if you even catch it then, it's better than, like, this year I was just kind of done with the season. I let the powdery mildew have it. But yeah, we get that too. But it's it's at the end of the season. It's not like when the plants are super healthy and strong.
Yeah, exactly. Pamela Lou sent in a question. We have a dry hillside with poor soil that gets a lot of sun. Are there any flowering plants you could recommend that we could grow out there?
Dry hillside, poor soil. Yeah. Oh, I see the question there too. I'm thinking of something called orris root. And so I don't know that this is, I think it's more of a fragrance, and even more of a grass. But I know that that's been used also to stabilize slopes, and I think it's quite drought tolerant, and it has an ability to kind of hold the soil in. So partly what you have, like, if you have a slope and it's really dry, is you want to put something in there on contour, so that when it does rain, like, slow it, sink it, spread it, is the mantra of water in permaculture. So if you can get some water into that hillside, then you have a much better ability to get any kind of plant to grow there. So first, what I would do is, I've seen these hay stuffed in these like mesh, like in a long tube, and to put that on contour, so it's the same level all the way across the hillside. And then, whatever debris falls on that hill is going to land and catch there. And then that debris will help catch water. And then when it rains, instead of just going down the hillside and taking any good organic matter with it, it will be stuck there, and it will infiltrate. It will sink into the soil. And then from there, then you have something where, you have much greater ability to choose something to grow. Like, probably it needs a little shade too. So I would say a fast growing, ideally like a fast growing leguminous tree. There's some that I've seen that are beautiful, and people use them in flower arrangements too. Acacias. I mean, those can be giant though too, and also people get allergies to their pollen. But there's a Acacia baeliana purpurea that is it's not super fast growing, but it is a legume, so it's going to fix nitrogen, and then its leaf litter will add a little nitrogen to your soil. It's wonderful in flower arrangements. I mean, it makes a beautiful foliage accent. It's kind of greeny purple. It's really, really pretty, and it will help. The roots will help them slow the soil loss and all the flow down the slope.
Amazing. Um, yeah, it sounds like you're getting into the Google culture conversation a little
Right.
bit. uh, so as far as flower, like yes, everything's about soil. That's what we've been really trying to preach here is when you're not growing plants, you're growing soil, and that's so
Yeah.
important. Um, Pamela says thank you for answering that question. And so as far as flowers, like it's hot here. It's very dry. It's very dry. It's very hot. Hopefully we get rain soon. Um, what are some more heat tolerance? Do you dabble into like the world of salvias and the sages and maybe some native plants for cut flowers, or
Yeah.
have you dabbled or want to?
I have a little bit, and I would like to do more. I'm just trying to write it down so I don't forget. But Matilaha poppies, it's fun. I'm just remembering that I dreamt this last night. So I have this design for like putting Matilaha poppies in the median in front of the house, and I dreamt last night that I was like, oh my god, they're like 8 feet high. Like, what am I going to do with them? I have to plant these. Anyway, so that's funny. That was my dream. Matilaha poppies are very desired by floral designers. I see them in some of my flower designer friends on Instagram who are very good at their craft. Design with Matilaha poppies, they're beautiful. There is a mallow, a native mallow, maybe Spheralcia, which is a hard word to say and spell. I think it's SPHR,
Okay.
Spheralcia. Desert mallow, maybe, or even bush mallow. Lavatera, I think, is another version of that, or a similar related species. That's a genus, but whatever. So the mallows often will hold up really nicely in a vase, and that's great. Oops, sorry about that. Yeah, let's make sure that doesn't happen again by opening it. Lavateras, which is a variety of mallow, and the Matilaha poppies. What else is good that way?
What about rock rose? Is that
The cistus. Well, that's not native though, is it?
um
I mean, it's drought tolerant, but I don't know that the variety that I've seen is native. It might be.
maybe I'll have to look that one
Um,
up too. Let's fact check this interview.
there are some lovely native succulents that you should never use because the native succulents are so threatened, endangered, and precious and rare. Um, but people use them in floral arrangements. They actually will stick them, wire them to a. I mean, this gets a little bit fancy and more so than I do. I just like to stick a stem in the vase. But they'll wire these succulents to like a little stick kind of thing, and then put it in arrangement. I've seen bridal bouquets with succulents in them that are gorgeous. So succulents they're super drought tolerant. Sedums are another wonderfully drought tolerant thing that we can grow here. They're usually say like to zone 8, but I've got sedums growing. Maybe they need a little bit more shade than what the tag would say because it's really hot and warm here. Back to natives though. In fact, I was just looking this up in the Floret being the person, Erin Benzakinus. I don't know if you Google it. She's like giant, so it's easy to find. But she has a list of things that go in market bouquets, and she lifts pineapple sage, and I think Salvia leucantha. Pineapple sage, I think usually red flowers with that amazing fragrance. And amazing hummingbird magnet. I mean, it's just a wonderful flower to grow. I love it. The smell is so good. You want to eat it.
It's the best. We have a bunch in stock right now, and the hummingbirds are in it all day long.
Yeah.
It's known as the hospitality flower. Fun
Huh.
fact.
Interesting.
Because a
So,
pineapple is usually the symbol of hospitality, so it's
oh,
also
I
known as
didn't
the
know that.
flower of hospitality.
That is so random and strange to me. Like pineapple, why is that? I did try to grow pineapples once too. I didn't succeed, but they grew for like at least like a year or two in the yard. They've since been shaded out. So salvia, that whatever pineapple salvia. What is the salvia species on pineapple sage? Remember?
No, no, I'd have to look that one up.
I think almost all nurseries just have it as pineapple sage.
Hmm.
And then Salvia leucantha, which I
Hmm.
think I'm always double checking like my botanical names because it's been so long. You know, they're in there somewhere, but sometimes they come out the wrong way. Which I think has those fluffy, like bluey purple flowers with just a little, they're like furry. She also listed that. So I've not used those in a vase before, but she knows what she's talking about. So they must last and be good.
Yep, yeah, those are beautiful. Beautiful. Is there anything that we haven't dove into yet, as far as what you wanted
Hmm.
to discuss and share with the listeners and viewers today?
Oh, we didn't talk at all about bulbs, really.
Yeah, yeah, definitely talk about bulbs.
Okay.
And then
So,
I'm
well, like,
totally ignorant on bulbs, even coming from Holland, Michigan, where it's all
oh,
tulip time.
uh-huh.
I'm completely ignorant when it comes to
Okay.
bulbs. So
Yeah,
absolutely.
so this season, and I forgot about the bulbs because I haven't done anything yet, except I did get one shipment and I put them in the fridge right away. So, we do great bulbs. People don't ever think of Southern California like, but I can't grow bulbs in Southern California, and that's not true. The tulips are really hit or miss, though. You have to chill them for at least 6 weeks, and even longer is better in the fridge, and then plant them. And then, depending, some will look really artsy and not really like the picture because they're so taxed by the heat that we have, but still kind of cool. I grew some black parrot tulips that were really like Art Deco kind of. The petals were just, I mean, they weren't what they were supposed to look like, but I loved them. Um, and I think there's like a apricot impression or a salmon impression line of tulips. I think they're Darwin tulips that actually did really well for me. Um, so that was kind of exciting. But daffodils, my gosh, there are so many kinds of daffodils. The trick with those is the ones that are later flowering usually flower when it's already starting to get hot. And I've not had luck with those. Like there was a variety that I so wanted. It was called Pink Charm, I think. And I've grown it 2 years in a row. I'm like, well, maybe last year was just a bad year. And like, well, maybe the last 2 years were just bad years because I just want it so badly. But I get like I buy lots of bulbs. I sell beautiful, beautiful daffodil flowers. Like really, they're stunning. And I think if you go to the flower mart to buy daffodils, they're usually closed when you buy them, and sometimes they don't quite open up. So one of the nice things about having them available locally is people can come and look and see what they look like, and they can buy them already opened, and it's just kind of nice. And there's a huge variety of bulbs, and then there's a whole line. I think they're the Tizeta daffodils. That the flowers sometimes they're not individually so large, but like one stem will have multiple flowers on it. I think Ehrlicher is one variety, and these will naturalize. Most daffodils, if you plant them here, they'll make beautiful flowers one year and then they're done. Like they might come back as a lot of foliage forever until you pull them out because you don't really grow a daffodil just for the leaves. Um, but the Ehrlicher and most of the paperwhites will naturalize here.
Okay.
And so they'll grow and then they'll come back next year. You don't have to buy them and plant them again. It's kind of lovely.
Mm-hmm.
Ranunculus is not truly a bulb. I mentioned that though. It's also time to start thinking about lilies. Um, and that's more of like a spring thing, but you want to like it takes like 6 months in advance to plan out your flower sort of calendar because you have to like buy the stuff and then get it and then plant it and then it takes a longer than that even to grow. So it's almost time to start thinking about lilies. Definitely time to start buying daffodil bulbs
Mm-hmm.
and little like muscaria, hyacinth. They look like tiny little clusters of grapes. They're really
Mm-hmm.
really cute.
Gorgeous.
Those are also nice to grow here too.
Will you be selling any of your starts this year? bigger bigger supply like you did
I'm
last year?
I'm working on it. I would love to, and I keep thinking like this is the year I'm really going to do it. I think I brought some last year. Oh yeah, I had Lysianthus last year,
Yeah. Mhm.
and this year, and so sometimes I also buy in plugs from somewhere else and then grow them out because Lysianthus growing from seed, which I do every year diligently. It's sort of like my I don't know what masochistic tendency. Like I'm going to do it. I have to do it. It has to be from seed. If it can't do it the hard way, it's not
Yeah.
worth doing. And then I'll like have a whole tray of like Iceland poppies, like 210 cell tray of Iceland poppies that I used a tweezers to put those little seeds in each of the cells. And then I'll get two flowers, two to grow. But so this year I ordered plugs of Iceland poppies. So I will have plenty of those also. And
Oh,
I'm happy
great.
to share those. Those are gorgeous.
Oh, they're so
And then other
pretty.
things that I grow. Because a lot of the things that you can buy from the retailers who, or the wholesalers who sell flowers are bedding plants.
Mhm.
That's where their market has always been in things that are short, like, a snapdragon that gets to be 12 or 18 inches.
Mhm.
But, what I want for my base is like, I want a 3 or 4 foot high snapdragon that's got a nice long flower on it. So I'm working on adding that. I will always have extra bulbs and stuff like that too, because you know, I have to get the varieties that I need, right? Because I have a need for these flowers and that picture of the flower, I need that.
Yes.
So I always end up with more than I can plant.
It's a good need to have though, you know.
I remember being at, I think it was a nursery that I won't mention, but it wasn't Fig Earth, and I was like, kind of feeling sheepish about, oh, that's a lot of plants I just bought there, and she was like, oh well, there's a lot worse
Yeah,
addictions.
I was good.
That's true. Try to tell that to my credit card, but there are a lot worse things to be
A
into. That's for
lot
sure.
worse. Yes. Yeah, when people come in week after week and they're saying talking about how much money they're spending here, I say, look, it could be a lot worse. You're buying
Yeah.
plants. Well, that's exciting. So I can't wait to see what you have or what you can bring in here because it was so nice to have
Yeah.
those. And then those little white daffodils that you planted in one of our tree boxes that keep coming up. I mean, the
Yeah.
smell is just
That's that
intoxicating.
air liquor daffodil. Yeah, that will naturalize here. That's why it comes back. And I snuck those in
I know.
because Connor was like, so like, oh, if it's not edible, we don't want it. I'm like, we'll never know. Somebody waters the tree. Anyway, gorilla flower planting.
That should be the next thing. We should be doing
I
guerrilla
love it.
flower planting
I love it
all
because
through
it
LA.
really like you could plant a vegetable. People may or may not notice it, but if you like sat at a bus stop and there was the fragrance of like one of those daffodils that just transports you,
Hmm.
like we all deserve that. Like that's what puts the beauty into life. Like the smell of a beautiful rose.
Oh,
I mean, these are the things that like evoke, you know, times past. And once upon a time, everybody had a cutting garden. I mean, everybody, a lot of people had
yeah.
cutting gardens. Our grandparents probably had cutting gardens. In fact, the LA Flower Mart was initially, I don't know why I'm pointing that way, like it's somewhere over there. The LA Flower Mart downtown is that way. Initially was like an effort of ladies who had, come out here. They were probably society ladies, who were growing lots of flowers in their space, and then the rest of the country wasn't. And when the railroad started up, people started shipping flowers back to other places. But before then, the flower mart was really like it was women who were growing flowers in their yards, and then they were being sold locally. So it had very humble beginnings, and I think it's time to revive that tradition and just make backyard flowers and front yard flowers and bus stop daffodils, and really just like more beauty.
Absolutely. We all need a little more beauty in our lives. And I know during COVID, I noticed that you were doing little drive-by flower pickups off your front porch, which I
That's right.
mean, that's all that it
Yeah.
takes. It just takes like
Yep.
that brightness to.
Yeah. Well, and I also did not so much anymore, but for a while too, I did a thing where I was giving away posies, small flower arrangements, for people who were volunteering to get out the vote. I know we're not going to talk politics, but it does bear saying that
Vote.
it's such an important thing to vote. Just vote, exercise your
You're
right
right.
and your responsibility to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's another benefit of having a backyard flower farm is that you get to gift flower arrangements, and it's something special, and it's not from the grocery store or whatever. It's just adds a little touch of something special and lovely.
Mm. Yep, absolutely. Okay, this is gonna be my last question for you. What are your top three favorite flowers? Summer or winter?
Wow.
I I'm like putting you right on the spot. You gotta answer.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. That is the mom brigade is going nuts right now. Um, anyway,
Don't be
so
emotional.
I have to always say dahlias, but I think with the dahlias, it's really kind of a love hate thing. Like I love to look at them, but growing them is a real pain in the butt.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to bag every single flower so that the caterpillars don't get them and other bugs. So it's a lot of work. But like I could just stare at a dahlia flower. That could be a meditation for me. It's just I can look at that. But like right now, the heirloom chrysanthemums, the
Mm-hmm.
spider mums with like the petals. I think I showed one of them back there. This is more of a quill mum, but it's similar. I mean, like this and just the nuance of color in there and the way the petals grow. Some people think it looks like it's like, oh, is that flower okay? I'm like, no, it's supposed to be like that. I love them. I
Mm-hmm.
love those. And then when the ranunculus start growing, like then I just love them the most. But also, like there's like some of the Madame Butterfly Snapdragons, like it's the nuance of color. It sort of goes from like a bronzy to like a peachy cherry. Like
Mm.
I mean, some of these colors are just they're just so beautiful. So that's hard, but probably it would probably be like, oh, and then I forgot all about like a whole bunch of other things. I've
It's
come
hard to
around to
pick just
roses
three.
too. I've definitely come around to roses.
No,
Um,
yeah, they're no longer a waste of space for you,
no,
but
and plus you can decorate with the petals. You can eat them. They're really really wonderful. And just like sticking your nose inside of a big rose bush is it's nice. It's a
it's
fragrance.
so nice. It is so nice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Joan, thank you so much for this conversation. Did you have anything else that you wanted to wrap it up with today?
Um, oh, I guess I should invite people to sign up for my newsletter
Yes,
and share little flower tips there.
there will be a link in underneath the video after this we
Yeah.
finish the live with all sorts of information
Mm-hmm.
from Joan, how to sign up for her newsletter, and her website, and anything else that
Okay, great.
pertains to this. So.
So I guess my question too is this is something I've been doing for a long time. Just growing in general. And because I was already a botanist and a gardener, the flower thing, my learning curve was shorter, but it was still something
Mm-hmm.
substantial for me. But I really truly want people to grow flowers. I think it just adds things I want for people to have in the
Mm-hmm.
world. And I would like to know what big challenges people have for growing flowers. Because I came at it already knowing a fair amount.
Mm-hmm.
So I forget sometimes what it's like to start out as like, yeah, I was a business major. I've never done anything.
Of
And I
course.
want to I want to make it some classes and really like make it be accessible for people so that they can go from like I have no idea what I'm doing. I have a brown thumb or whatever people say, to like, oh look, I just grew this and feel really really happy about it. So I was just really just a plea for people to let me know like what you need to know, what your stumbling blocks are, and then I can create stuff to help everybody grow more beautiful things.
Absolutely. With COVID having to move these workshops like this online, it's not
Hmm.
the most conducive for creating these connections, but it's so important. Yeah, that that you share the years and years of experience that you have within this world, and then specifically within the flower world. So definitely, I'm gonna have open up on the website an area for the sign up for your newsletter,
Mm-hmm.
and possibly we can do smaller group workshops in the future. I think that'd be really
Yeah,
great for people to
that
get
would be
because we
great.
get that all the
Yeah.
time at Fig. especially since COVID. I've never gardened before. I have no idea where to start. I have no idea what I'm doing. I kill everything that I put in my garden or, in my house. So, being that starting point, you especially, you're a great teacher. So, to be that starting point for people to really flourish and bloom, pun intended.
Awesome. That's great. That's the name. Mamabotanica Blooms is the name of my business, and it's not just about like the bloom, like a flower, but
Yeah,
it's an action word. So
exactly.
it's an action word.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Joan. It's so great to see your face, even though it's on the computer. And
Mhm.
we'll be in touch. And thank you to everyone that joined us and sent in your questions. And we will see you all again soon. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.